Morning BookTube. Would like to share my 2 cents this morning about a trilogy that seems to be heavily divided on BookTube, and that is Deborah Harkness's All Souls trilogy. So the first in this trilogy is A Discovery of Witches. This came out February 2011. It is a contemporary fantasy, but I would also consider it to be a bit of a historical fantasy as well. I had found this book initially in an airport bookstore. I was going to Florida to see my mom and my sister and my brother and all my family over there. I was going to see all my family in Florida and happened upon this book, which is too cute because it turns out that's where she got her inspiration to do the trilogy. Is she was in an airport bookstore and noticed the plethora of creature features available and was wanting a way to incorporate her historical knowledge into modern day creature books. So she got her inspiration in the place that I first found this book. I then proceeded to read this book through all of my vacation. Probably should have spent more time paying attention to my family, but that's okay. I was absorbed from the get-go. I did have layovers, so it provided a lot of entertainment. The plot of the first book brings Diana Bishop. She's a tenured professor at Oxford and specializes in alchemical history. She gets to spend her days in a famous library researching information. She also teaches at Oxford University. But the plot begins with her stumbling upon a magical manuscript, which turns out to be Ashmole 782. And she's initially a little shaken by this discovery because she tries so hard to not associate with any of her witchy powers that do already run in her blood. After her discovery of this magical manuscript, there's now an onslaught of other creatures, demons, vampires, and other witches like her that also want the manuscript that she has found, but sent back into the stacks at the Bodleian Library. Enter Matthew Claremont, who is also a vampire scientist, geneticist, but he ends up becoming her protector as well from all the other creatures that want the book, even though he wants the book too for his research. The setting of this book, she got me good, because the initial setting is in a library, which I love libraries. Being a book reader comes naturally to me. So she gets you there. It's in Oxford, England, the Bodleian Library. She does travel at certain points to set tour France, which is described magically and beautifully as well. There is a lot of character building in this first book, a lot of information that is necessary to understand everything that's going on since there's so much detail. And she's also doing such a spin or a twist on it that you do have to be on top of everything that's going on. A lot of people found the pacing to be boring. I was so immersed in this book, though. I did not find it boring whatsoever. I was so surprised to find that people were bored, but I think this might go along with the you should read things that you're interested in, because then they're just going to naturally be interesting. I don't tend to read books about things that aren't things that interest me, because then I'm not going to want to read the book, which defeats the whole purpose. So it helps to read about things you're interested in. I'm very interested in this, everything she had to say, as well as all the historical information. So I found it very encompassing. I immersed myself in it. It was a lovely retreat into a whole different world. My favorite part of the book is how easy it is to immerse yourself in her storytelling. I understand the picture she's trying to create with everything that she tells you. I find that's very important in a book, and she nails it with all the details and all the information that she provides you. It makes it easy for you to picture exactly what she's trying to say. I don't have a dislike for this book. I love this book. It's one of my favorites. I have no dislikes for this one, so taking a pass on a dislike for the first book because I loved it. On to the second book, Shadow of Night. This one came out July 2012. It is also same genre, historical fantasy, contemporary fantasy. This book picks up after Matthew and Diana flee the present to go to 16th century Elizabethan London. Diana needs to be taught magic by a witch of her nature that can specifically help her learn how to use her magic so that they can do everything that needs to be done. Because it's not just one foe in these series of books. It seems to be there's a series of issues that continuously need to be dealt with. So Matthew agrees to take her into a time where they'll be easily able to stay under the radar and avoid persecution for Diana being a witch, which of course doesn't go as planned. But all of the historical conundrums and encounters that happen, I found to be incredibly enlightening as well as entertaining. I don't tend to be a big fan of history, and she presents it in such a way that I was genuinely interested in finding out more about these people she had written about. So the setting of this book is very different from the other two because they are in Elizabethan London. So they're set in London, they're in England, which isn't too far off from where they are, but they're in such a different time frame that it's a whole different world. It is one of my first trips into historical fiction. I feel that Deborah Harkness does an amazing job at this, exposing me to past people and places I may not have stumbled upon myself. And like I said, I have since done further research into and found myself interested in when I wouldn't have found or wanted to look into that myself. Characters come even more to fruition. There's so many new character developments because they're exposing themselves to a whole different frame of time. Those friendships and relationships that Matthew previously has because he lived in that time, and also that Dan, being a historian, she is so familiar with all of these people and places and all the things that are going to happen. It's hard for her sometimes to not be in too much awe of, I don't want to get too much into that. The pacing in this one I did find to be a little more off. It's a little jumpy here, there, and everywhere. The time frame in which they're in London and then go to France and then back in London and Prague, and it's a big journey to get through this entire book. But you learn a lot, and it always keeps you entertained. It's a nice big adventure in this one. I think she does a nice job closing some aspects or maybe answering some questions that need to be answered while still preparing you to want to continue with the third book. So my like for this book is, as you can tell by this review, I love the teaching aspect of this book. Deborah Harkness provides such authentic, specific information on so many levels that I'm able to really visualize these scenes and characters in my mind. Being a historian herself gives her such an ability to honestly give detail to all of the aspects in a very clever and believable way. So I enjoyed so much of the entertainment of this book. And it's so unlike anything that you experience in present day. Definitely had a dislike for this book. Chapter 10 and 11 had me cringing. Chapter 10 starts a sequence of scenes that I'm not fond of. The two main characters go to France to see Matthew's father, who you know from reading the first book are no longer with them. So this chapter and the next are full of self-loathing on Matthew's part, dealing with having to see his father mourning all over again the loss of his father, even though his father is there with him. And also choosing to mourn his past all over again. It's very uncomfortable. Post meltdown on Matthew's part, his father decides to enlighten Diana on who Matthew really is as a person in the most excruciating ways possible. The audiobook physically makes me uncomfortable. I guess because I can skim so much through the regular book. But I did have to fast forward through the audiobook as well because the amount of control he is attempting to exert is just, ugh. I mean, there's a purpose for it. I understand what she's trying to do. And he is trying to do multiple things and show them both multiple things and bring things out into the light. But I really just don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy that side of people or having to deal with all that. So, but after that, he goes on to be an awesome person, and the story continues. And it's just those 2 chapters are just absolutely not my favorites. So yeah, they might be necessary, but I don't want to have to read that stuff. So I just hit fast forward until all of the, I don't even know what it is. What am I trying to think of? So much ego. I don't know. The last book in the trilogy is The Book of Life. Is properly titled because it centers the most around the manuscript and really digs into her trying to complete the circle. And it all comes back to the Book of Life. So this finale does not disappoint. There are life-changing events for their family as a whole. There's some ghosts that come back to haunt them. Of course, not actual ghosts, more like vampires that come back to haunt them. And I'd have to say, without saying too much, the main purpose of the last book is to tie everything together, but also to seek justice for a family member they unknowingly lost in the second book. So Diana is able to find closure, and also their family can find closure by the events that take place. Science and history weave a very lovely tale to bring this into a nice conclusion. So my like for this book is that it does such a wonderful job bringing everything together. It's nice when a finale can provide you with a lot of closure. I find this book really does a wonderful job at that. My dislike of this book would be there's a side story of unrequited love between one of the main characters and one of the sub-characters. And I feel for him so much. He reminds me so much of my husband. So in that of course she has to love the main character. She can't love a sub-character. But his unrequited love breaks my heart because he reminds me so much of my husband. I'm fond of him. I guess for that reason, he's one of my favorite characters. Throughout I think the second and third book. I'm not sure if he's in the first book. I can't remember. I'd have to go look back. But he's definitely a main sub-character in the second and third books. And I'm a big fan of Gallowglass, so love that dude. Love these 3 books. I would definitely say they're worth your time and energy. I've read them multiple times, and I've listened to them on audiobook multiple times, and it never gets old. She tells such an amazing tale. I appreciate every detail she puts into this. If you are listening, I appreciate your books so much. I garner so much enjoyment out of them, and I genuinely tend to smile a lot while reading or listening to these audiobooks. So if you have not given it a try, I would give it a try. Should you be interested in this type of thing, these are definitely one for the books. I recommend these highly. I am a huge fan. Never do adore her work, and she gets 2 thumbs up. So Thank you so much.